be honest with yourself, right? I mean,
Mhm.
my grandfather always told my dad, like, you can lie to others, but not to yourself. I think that very early on, the sooner you realize how unglamorous starting a company is, the better you're going to be as a. So like, don't do it because it's sexy. Do it because you love it. See it as like we want to be a dynasty that wins multiple championships, and in order to be there, I don't want you to score 100 points in a game and then disappear. I
Okay.
rather be a consistent 25-point
Mhm.
person every game. I know,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the first months of any ideation phase, it's really like if you're going to do this, the number one believer should be you. Uh, and you shouldn't believe in it because others believe in it. You should believe it because you believe in it. And little by little, the other believers will come. I think working at an OpenAI is significantly more attractive than working at Goldman Sachs these days. So like, don't do it because it's sexy. Do it because you love it. Do it because you actually believe in the idea. Do it because you owe it to your customers. I find starting a business the most gratifying experience of my life. Uh, but it is hard. It is not harder than other things, right? I think being a soldier, being a mother, being other things is significantly harder. The process of you still how to identify the best investors, that still holds true in any geography. And it's a humbling experience, but it's amazing, right? As long as you take you turn it as a learning experience, and you realize first and foremost, I want to be the best I can be. There was a young girl. I'm blanking on the name. Had died, and like it was a completely avoidable case of malpractice. I think I went to college with a clear mindset that I wanted to work in Wall Street. At that point in time, the best talent was going to Wall Street, right? Like, so I was attracted to like, hey, like I'm gonna compete with myself, but I also want to be shaped by the most talented folks out there.
Just before we get started, if you're enjoying the podcast, can you please make sure you subscribe or follow my channel? This helps me out tremendously. Andres, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Paul, thanks for having me. Good morning for you.
Yeah, so it's 8 in the morning here and 5 p.m. in New York. You're in New York and you can see the bright lights of New York behind through
Yeah,
your window, so to
yeah.
speak. So are you like in the center there or near the park or whereabouts are you located?
I'm exactly 1 block away from Bryant Park, or better known, the areas, the vicinity of Times Square. So sometimes, as it gets darker this afternoon, you might start seeing some of the LEDs. So
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, it's pretty central. Okay.
yeah.
It's a pretty amazing city, a lot happening there. So just to get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background and what you're doing currently?
Yes, I'm born in the U.S., but I was raised my entire life in Bolivia, hence the accent.
Okay.
I come from a family that has been in the auto space directly or indirectly for generations. My grandfather was a race car driver. My dad has worked in auto finance a good chunk of his career. And my first job out of high school was selling cars. I started as a car salesman, paid for college selling cars here in the U.S. And then I
Mhm.
spent 10 years at Wall Street after graduating from school. Along the way, went to Harvard for my MBA. That's where I met my co-founder uh, almost 10 years ago now, and stayed in touch and decided to join forces to build what Fuse is today. Fuse was originally born as a direct-to-consumer lending brand. We were not lending out of our balance sheet, but we were brokering loans. In the process of brokering those loans, we got to meet a bunch of lenders. Those lenders ultimately told us, guys, instead of selling us loans, sell us software, and that's how Fuse was born. Out of like the realization that we had built a software machine that was sought after, that we were solving what initially started as a problem solve as a solution that was internal became a product, And fast forward to today, we raised millions of dollars of capital. Um, we have a ton of engineers working all over the world, and just
Mhm.
little by little trying to make our impact in making the lending experience much easier for lenders all over the place.
Right. And later on, I'm going to ask you about, getting that investment as well, because that
Mhm.
can be a big hiccup, a big hurdle for many founders. And a lot of the people listen to this show are early stage startup founders and entrepreneurs. I read on one of your posts, you're actually standing right there in Broadway.
Mhm.
And I'll just read it out to you. I never forget the first time I looked up at the bright billboards of Times Square as a young kid visiting New York. Little did I know that decades later I'll return to find our startup, Fuse, celebrated on those iconic screens. So you've got on the billboard, you've got Fuse, which is your company up there. And then you say the journey to get here has been long with twists and turns I could never have imagined. I want you to tell us all about that journey.
Well, I'm the son of
So
immigrants, right?
starting right back.
Yeah, yeah, I'm the son of immigrants, right? So they've been ups and downs, right? Like moving to a new country doesn't come easy, and
So
I do think that
take us
like,
back to Bolivia. What was your life
yeah,
there? What was happening there? And then when
yeah.
did you move?
Well,
Yep.
the '90s were pretty idyllic. I would say I just when people talk about nostalgia about the '90s, I do not have nostalgia necessarily, but I do recognize that the '90s were a pretty idyllic time. Like I'm a child of that era,
Mhm.
right? Like grew up in that time, the unipolar world. Very lots, not much happening other than just the internet. There was no really big conflicts. And I would say that as the new millennia began, like Bolivia started kind of like falling in a spiral of just disagreement as a nation of where the direction it should take. And we pretty much got into almost in a civil war in the early 2000s, which translated into the country not being in a good financial position in the early 2000s. That kind of forced a lot of Bolivians, not only my parents, but other Bolivians to kind of like try to find opportunities elsewhere. So I kind of like saw that entire debasing of and brain drain that they tends to affect so many of our emerging economies. It's not a problem unique to Bolivia, right? It affected us. It affected all the families. My dad left first, and we stayed in Bolivia because we saw, in terms of like we were getting very good education and things like that. But like as a family, we were in different countries, right? I moved to the U.S. To take full advantage of the fact that I was an American citizen, and that I could actually go to schools here for in open doors.
So how old were you
And
when you moved from
I
Bolivia
was
to the US?
18. I was
18.
18. So
And so there was a
I,
lot
I,
of problems going on there, and you said like could even be a civil war. I mean, what were you feeling in that time? Did you realize all those things that were happening?
I mean, it's scary, right? Like I was. This is 2002, 2003.
Yeah.
Um, we, I mean, you see tanks on the street. You cannot go to school. That obviously, like some people had it way worse than me. Like I want to play victim here. Like I in many ways I lived a pretty cushy life too there, right? Like it's not that uh, uh probably compared to the average Bolivian, very I was going to private school. Like nothing was really missing from our lives, but
Yeah, but I guess like imagine like
mm,
tanks in the street and that. I mean, that would
mm.
cause a general anxiety to the whole population, I would imagine.
Oh yeah, of course. You don't go to school. Like the supermarkets are closed. Like just it's kind of like the same thing that whenever you have a natural disaster, with the difference that it's caused by like just political uproar, right? Like in this is a highly divided country. Um, People die, people get shot, like all of that kind of stuff. I guess I was young, but I was it it was highly in my mind, like the stress was there, right? Um it it's what's going to happen to the country, like what's the government going to have going to do? The president going to quit? Which actually happened. They ended up, we had like multiple presidents in the span of like a number of years, and living through that, I mean, it just helps you understand the fragility of uh, democracies, right? And also like just the fact that like the political class cannot ignore uh, the needs and wants of folks that feel ignored, right? If anything, I actually saw populism right into the face when I was a teenager, right? Like I think everything that is happening in the world, it's not news to like most folks that have grown in Latin America, right? Like populism and like just the backlash of offshoring, it's something that we've seen, and it's no surprise to us, I would say, as communities.
Just on that as well, you also posted that the environment inspired me to bring about change, starting with addressing Bolivia's healthcare system issues in high school.
Mm.
So tell us more about
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So during high school, there was the Bolivian Senate, or I think or the House of Representatives. I don't remember exactly uh, right now. They made an open ask for folks to propose laws, and I had the opportunity to send a proposal alongside some of my friends and on like just reforming healthcare laws there. So
Mhm.
we went through that process. We ended up being finalists. We spoke. We were kind of like we attended um, a session of Congress, and it was pretty nice. I mean, you just think about the proposal as a whole had to do with malpractice. That's not something that like Bolivia had at that point. There's really
Mm.
just uh, so we presented an entire proposal, we fleshed it out, and ultimately, like that was considered by folks at that time. It felt pretty good. I mean, if anything, being a 17, 18-year old and going through that process, it's not something you can necessarily do in America, right? I think
Yeah.
we were lucky that we live in a smaller country, and that we got the attention of some of the representatives within Congress.
And what motivated you to want those changes in the healthcare system? Was it something that happened with your family or something in
Yeah,
general you saw?
I think that there was a highly publicized case, and there were multiple cases that like the media paid attention. But I do remember there was a young girl. I'm blanking on the name. Had died, and like it was a completely avoidable case of malpractice, lack of processes, and lack of accountability. And I do think that that was kind of the culprit of like us thinking, hey, this person is our age, or just slightly younger than us. It could have been any of us, right? Like, because
Mhm.
obviously, government-owned hospitals tended to have higher incidence of this, but even like more expensive, higher end that type of healthcare was still like there was no clear frameworks for insurance for malpractice, right? So that we thought, hey, like there should be clear consequences for this, but also like insurance mechanisms by which if this happens, at least
Yeah.
both parties kind of get protections, right, and
Yeah.
not just say like, sorry, we made a mistake.
No, I agree. But I mean, it's not any like 17, 18-year-old that would do that. So there must be something in you that you want to bring about change and do something good
Oh
and
yeah,
help others.
oh, I mean, when someone your age, it's deprived of like the miracle of life. I think that uh I consider myself someone that loves life. I think most people love their lives, and so uh, just being able to make it better so it doesn't happen again. Of course, we couldn't really get that person alive again, right? Like, unfortunately,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
at least so that it wouldn't happen again, or to the bare minimum reduce the incidence of things like that happening.
Yeah.
I think that's why we focus on that. Um, uh, And I think that impact was when just being able. I think that what shows you at the young age is that you can make things happen, right? Like, it's not always going to be the same level of reverberations, but that it starts with just caring a little bit more. And if you care, and you add that with just waking up every day and then trying to do a difference, I think no matter what you do, you're going to be able. You just need to care a little bit more than like the average person, and you
Yeah.
don't need to be a genius, right? Like, you just need to have your heart into that and like put put in put into like changing that, right? It could be malpractice insurance, it could be healthcare, it could be like voting, representation, whatever it is. And in our case, like what I care a lot about today is like making the digital journey to automation for lenders better. But
Yeah.
I'm sure that that's the same level of passion is something that like folks in any field can bring about, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just
And really important in the startup as well, because it's so difficult to do. You need that purpose and passion to really have the perseverance to continue with that. So going back to the story, so in Bolivia, and then all this situation happens, your father goes to the US, and then you go to the US, and what
Yep.
happens there?
So I start college, right? Like college, amazing. I would say like I feel extremely lucky that I got to go to university in the US. It's a humbling experience, right? I was a nerdy kid in high school, and then you go to school and like you realize, wow, that the I do remember someone that went to Yale a few years before me. He told me, listen, in very future, you're not going to be the best at everything, but as long as you're like a little bit of an average in most categories, you're going to be fine. And
Mhm.
and I thought like, no, I'm going to be the best at everything. The reality is like, yeah, you're not going to be the best at everything. But I think as a kid, you come in there thinking, and it's a humbling experience, but it's amazing, right? As long as you take you turn it as a learning experience, and you realize first and foremost, I want to be the best I can be. Not, I don't necessarily want to be better than Paul.
Yeah.
I'm going to set my own benchmarks and like my own objectives, and the sooner you realize that, that it, you even perform better, right? So I think that
Yeah.
was key. I loved my experience at school. I actually got to experience two universities in America. In the US, you can do this thing what's called transferring. So I
Mhm.
started at one school and ended up transferring to another, and had completely different experience. One is Catholic school in the Midwest, and the other one is a coastal Ivy League school. So I got to see both, and the experience could have not been more different, right? So that was pretty lucky. And then after school, I think I went to college with a clear mindset that I wanted to work in Wall Street, and I got lucky too, because there's a combination of work and of course luck. I was fortunate enough that I got a job at an investment bank here in New York City, and my love affair with New York City started like 13 years ago. That way, I've been on and off of the city, but somehow Times Square keeps pulling me back into it, and to the point that I built a family here. My son was born in New York City, so we'll see how long I can afford to stay here. Not only from an economic standpoint, but also like if having a kid that grows without a garden, I wonder if we will ultimately choose to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. And so what you were saying before is like, instead of trying to be the best and beat everybody, it's just trying to be the best that you can be personally. I think that's really good advice. Otherwise, but there's always going to be people that are better than us. I always say, I always quote Socrates, all as I know is I know nothing. So I have that sort of attitude, and I count myself as the dumbest person in the room, and but I will obviously try and be the best that I can be. And if we try and there's always going to be people better than us. And, it's like the same applies to, there's always people that have more than us. And we think, oh, if only I had, this and that and the other, instead of being grateful for what you have. I think being grateful is such a powerful thing as well. So I really like that. But I'm really interested, what attracted you to work on Wall Street? Because, look, I don't know much about it. I only know that movie, Greed is Good, and the stuff
Yeah.
like, yes, a lot of people think about Wall Street as a lot of really greedy people trying to rip all the money from the world. That's just probably a very ignorant view. But so what attracted you to work on Wall Street?
I think at that point in time, it was where like in I mean, I did not see myself going to get a PhD in economics or like be a lawyer or a doctor. I
Yeah.
was pretty okay, like just starting to work with after undergrad. And at that point in time, the best talent was going to Wall Street, right? Like, so I was attracted to like, hey, like I'm gonna compete with myself, but I also want to be shaped by the most talented folks out there. I think today finance still has pretty good talent, but if you think about it, Google was not the same in 2011, right? The attractiveness, I would say, like I was that last generation that like did not necessarily see technology as like the hottest industry. Man, the bottom line is I'm in tech, right? But
Yeah.
13, I mean, 13, 14 years ago, which it just wasn't, right? Like, I remember folks going to work at Amazon and some of us thinking, oh, they probably didn't get a job at a bank, right? You're like, in hindsight, you're like, you're the idiots, right? Like definitely, but it is a different mindset, right? Like the collective was, okay, like if you want to work with the best talent pool in the world, the best talent pool at that point was Wall Street, right?
Yeah, it's
And
like the
that
internet.
has
If you want
changed.
to be the best talent in this world, then you go to Silicon Valley. So I guess
Exactly,
that's a good point.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
at that point in time, that was it. In the same way, the Florence was the best city in the world to be, I don't know, an entrepreneur or a creative in the Renaissance, right? Like it's
Mhm.
at that point in time, it was New York City and it was Wall Street, right? Like that was the industry. I think
Yeah.
like now, you could make a very good argument that it's not, right? It's still very competitive, but like I think working at an open AI is significantly more attractive than working at Goldman Sachs these days, right? Like
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
ask the average person. So
And
that's kind of
tell
what
me
drove.
what was your experience there, like working for these big corporates, like one you just mentioned? Was it
Yeah,
like the movies,
yeah.
really cutthroat, or like, what was the experience there?
It's high pressure, right? I think what you see in the movies usually tends to like show like not investment bankers. It shows like other sides of within the Wall Street world. Of course, it's a dramatized and exaggerated way. Do you see like some of those behaviors? Yes, like, but you see those behaviors in other industries. But I would say that it encapsulates it's that it is a tough environment, right? Like the hours are
Hmm.
grueling, right? Like so it's not as uh definitely is not the life is not easy of the average banker, but you get compensated. You make huge time sacrifices, right? Like the hours are grueling, but you consciously go into right to do that, right? I'm not saying that it's that you should feel sorry for that, but it is not it's not for everyone, right? Like being a 22-year-old and working 19, 20 hours on a consistent basis for weeks, it's hard, right? Like only at that age you could probably work that much, right?
Yeah.
Even it and perhaps you work at that pace because you're inefficient. You could attribute it to multiple things, but like the expectations are pretty high for someone that has never worked, right? So
Mm.
the pressure is high. I would say it's the type of industry that like in which 99% doesn't do it, right? You need to be 100% right all the time. Of course, like not your projections, but kind of like the slide, the presentation, the look of things, all of that needs to be perfect, right? It's one of the few industries in which you need to be 100% correct. Otherwise you're perceived as as a laggard. And that level of discipline, I think it shapes you forever, right? Like just sometimes to the point that you need to tone it down, right? Like you come to other industries and you're kind of expect that, like you just give two instructions and you expect that someone is going to do it. Like it's just not the same. And I it's you just need to adapt. The world that obviously doesn't work like an investment bank, and that's probably for the better.
There must have been like a lot of burnouts, I imagine, working those
Oh
sort of
yeah,
hours, that sort of pressure.
absolutely. I mean,
People just can't sustain that, like I've talked to quite a few guests that worked in corporate, not 19 hours a week, but maybe a day, like 16 or something. So, I mean, you'd be sleeping like 4 hours, a night, and that's so unhealthy. Like, I don't know
yeah.
how long that could be sustained for.
I think. I mean, hopefully it has changed. I mean, obviously, like I left. I went to private equity. It's not too dissimilar to banking, but it's a little bit better. And I I I think it just people go consciously go into that knowing that like you're going to essentially work for 2 to 3 years, twice or three times what the average person works, but they actually get a ton of actual learning, right? I as far as like being able and willing to work hard, you're never again going to be allergic to hard hours, right? Like in essence, like you just know that you can do stuff, right? Like if you need to do it, you do it, right? Like, and because you felt that intensity, so
Mm-hmm.
that that I am super grateful for those years, right? And just being able to say thank you and those things a little bit more. I think the please and thank yous are not necessarily the most used words in those years, but like you know what, people are tired and people like you should be, as it says, you should be very quick to like forgive people, right? And like I think I look at those years and I almost look at them with I want to say nostalgia, but like very good professional years. I learned a lot. I think I wouldn't be able to be a half of the efficient and effective that I am now had I not gone through those years. So I don't think I have regrets from a
What,
professional
what about
standpoint.
what about in your company, Fuse? I mean, what about your employees? What sort of hours do you get them to work, and is there like a life work balance happening there, and also with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've learned, right? Like, we don't want to burn out people, right? Because this is not a 2 3 year program. Like, we're the way that banking is designed to burn out people because people leave after 2 3 years, right? They go to different jobs. Like, the job is designed at that junior level to be that way. And the extra, it's an agreement in which both parties are getting the best out of each other. You're getting the young years, and it places you in a better job. I think for us is like we realize that hey, like the way that I see a career of Fuse is a long term play, right? Um, it's we don't want folks to like score a lot of goals in like the first quarter and just check out the rest of the game, right? And
Yeah,
it's
it
not
seems
only the
like a
game.
very unsustainable model. I mean,
Yeah,
it's not me all the time, but burning out
yeah,
young people, I don't know.
yeah,
It doesn't sound like a very good model to me. I think it's really important, even in the younger years, to maintain that mental
yeah.
health, and not burn out because it can affect really. I mean, obviously, it sounds like you didn't burn out. I guess everybody has
Most people
different.
don't burn out. As I
Okay.
said, most people don't burn out, right? Like it's
Hmm.
hard. It's
Hmm.
very hard. But I mean, I guess you can have an entire philosophical discussion in which like no one should burn out, but people burn out probably at a higher rate in that industry than others, right? You have a higher propensity of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, uh, and maybe the reason why, even if the numbers are similar to other industries, it's if you put the average, the people that choose other industries in those jobs, they probably like will burn out faster, right? Like
Yeah.
the tolerance level for being burned out, that self selection kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
probably
And
translates.
I mean, startups are very similar because it's like usually, really long hours, particularly when you're starting. But it's always important to keep some sort of balance as well. So you need to sustain that. And so,
Yeah.
what do you do in your startup to sustain your own well-being and that of your people working for you?
I mean, first and foremost, you don't make them work 19-hour days, right? Like that's
Good
it
to
just
know.
like just clear KPI there, right? As I
Yes.
was kind of like losing wanted to use this analogy of like it's not the first quarter amount of points. Or like if it was a basketball game, we don't see this as a basketball game. We see it as like we want to be a dynasty that wins multiple championships. And in order to be there, I don't want you to score 100 points in a game and then disappear. I
Yeah.
rather be a consistent 25-point
Mhm.
person every game. I know that I'm gonna have that production, and I know that like I ensure that I'm going to win as many tournaments as possible if I keep you happy at that pace, right?
Yeah.
As a contributor, as a rock star in the team, or more like a just the leader of the team. That's kind of how I see the composition of our team today. Like it's a long term play. We need to make sure that our stars and rising stars like feel that love, but that they don't necessarily feel the pressure that every game they need to produce 100 points, because that's how you burn them out. Because of course they're gonna they cannot play at that same level every game. But as long as you need on average 100 points to win a game, so like you just need to make sure that like that composition of the team, everyone produces that, and like
Yeah.
that's how you turn into a dynasty instead of just a one hit wonder team.
Okay, yeah, that's really good advice. Good analogy. So going back to your story, so you're on Wall Street and you do your time there, and you work with some of the big corporations, and then how does your startup come about? Well, why do you start it? Look, tell us about just in like one or two sentences what Fuse does, and then why you started that and how that came about.
Yeah. Fuse is software for banks, and where we help them is better originating loans. So you apply for a loan, we are the entire orchestration layer behind it. That's kind of the quick take
Okay.
on it. Why
Yeah.
did I start Fuse, and why did Mark and I start Fuse? At, at, at a more macro level, I want the marginal borrower today to get that loan, right? Today, because the lenders are operating with legacy systems and they're not as efficient as they could be, they cannot afford to like say yes to folks that like are perfectly good credit subjects. And I'm not talking about like just like it's folks that like because you, it takes too much time, or like the verification of documents takes too much time. They end up going for like suboptimal credit opportunities, or like not even apply for a loan. I want to make it very easy for them to apply and say yes to credit, right? And this helps the. I mean, everyone knows the flywheel effect of credit. We know the negatives because we've seen that too. But in general, when they're aside from like a few times in history, in general, like credit has the combination of technology and credit has have been amazing for humanity, right? So being able to like be part of that little piece of that story of making banks more efficient, and like that person that wants to open a new business, that kid that wants to go to college, that mother that wants to get a personal loan for uh, paying off some like more expensive debt. That kind of stuff is what it really what drives us.
Is there some backstory there where in the past family member or somebody hasn't had that opportunity, and that's what's really motivated you to do this?
I've always seen lenders as amazing actors, right? Probably I'm biased, and I mean I remember going to the banks or like financial institutions in Bolivia to pick up money that my dad said, right?
Yeah.
And I always went there with hope, right? It's like awesome, like this is we're gonna be able to pay for school, we're gonna get new clothes, and we're gonna be able to apply for university in the U.S. So I see the banks as positive actors, right? Obviously, there are mistakes that happen along the way, but overall, they're an incredible agent of economic boom, right? Like the sole function of like actually moving capital allows you to pick up more efficient marketplaces, right? Like, and bankers are pretty good at that, right? This is good risk. Let's finance this, right? And they're the first ones at noticing when something is not an attractive area, and being able to power that is what really makes me wake up every day and feel pretty excited about what we're doing.
That's great. Look, just out of interest, what are your thoughts on Bitcoin, like a decentralized finance that there's only 21 million of them, so they can't do money printing and it doesn't devalue, even though it's quite, fluctuating a lot at the moment. What are your thoughts on that? Because I think a lot of banks are sort of worried about that because it's becoming more and more and more popular.
Yeah. I think that from a generational standpoint, and then again, as someone that, in the context of the US, I can understand the skepticism around it, right? But if you think about it from the context of like people coming from Bolivia or places where like they grew up in places where like we've seen hyperinflation or not reliable kind of national currencies, this is a godsend, right? In many ways, right? Of course, like you can say, well, we have the US dollar too, but let's for argument's sake, I think that having an alternative that is decentralized and that hopefully, because it's not like from an energy, it's not very energy efficient, right? So hopefully we get in a way that it's actually efficient, and hopefully it's easier to actually send capital. But I would say the founder Coinbase articulates it this way better than I do, right? So I would invite everyone to go and read some of the blog posts that he put in the mid 2010s around why he built Coinbase, and I think that articulates quite well the promise of obviously some cryptocurrencies. Of course, like there's a lot of noise around, and like not everything is going to be positive, but the idea of creating a currency for the internet and that it's has lower friction and makes it easier to like and all of that, I think we're better off as a society. And I think the market thinks that's the case too. The applications, I think we will see what happens. But overall, it's not me who's saying. And if we believe in the invisible hand, the invisible hand is showing us today that there's a value. And historically speaking, sometimes valuations tell us a little bit more of a future use case. It's not always going to be reflective of what ends up happening. But when you think about the valuations of Google or other companies in the past, and people thinking that's crazy, and then like, well, it turns out to be like much more than what it was, right? So we'll see.
Yeah, the person I would recommend to learn more about it is Michael Saylor. He's the founder of MicroStrategy. He's bought a huge amount of Bitcoin, and he explains it so well. Whereas Coinbase is an exchange that, crypto goes through, but Bitcoin itself, a lot of people don't understand it, but we won't get into that now. Now, obviously you've had a lot of investment in your startup yourself, and investment can be really difficult for startups. So what sort of advice can you give? Well, tell us about, what sort of investment you have, and then what advice can you give to other startup founders looking to get investment?
First and foremost, each founder needs to ask themselves the question: do I want to raise money, or I want to bootstrap? If I'm going to bootstrap, what are the metrics how much money am I willing to put on the line of my kind of net worth to get to the truth? So like, once they figure that out, let's say they want to go fundraise, reality is that most people don't get backed, right? So even if you say like, okay, I want to raise money, I think it's very important to like set timelines, right? Like if this thing doesn't take off and I don't raise money by X date, otherwise you find yourself in limbo. And I think most people fail, even the ones that raise money fail, right? Like I think it's like less than 10% of folks actually make it, right?
That's the name of my show, Fail Wisdom. So yeah, it's a lot of failures. Yes,
exactly. So you need to know that, right? Like it I think that what you knowing that, let's say you raise capital, right? Once you raise capital, you have tied yourself to a particular set of expectations of the speed of execution, and kind of like what is the size of the exit that needs to happen for you to be able to actually make a good make it big, right? Like your investors are not going to be happy if you raise venture money and you sell your company for 10 million. Like your investors are not going to be fired up, right? Like your investors want you to be a unicorn.
They're after the unicorns. They want you to be a unicorn.
Yeah.
I mean that type of VC sort of investor, and then there's the social enterprise, which is a bit different. But yeah, in this case, yeah.
But in the US, like they give you millions not because I mean they believe in you and everything, but they are searching that type of return profile, right? So it's up to us to deliver that growth, right? And it's not that we go to jail if it doesn't happen, but like, I mean, unless you're a thief, but if you fail just trying, that's kind of the end. But like, guess what? You spend 4, 5, 10 years of your life trying to make it, right? And you probably get 0, right? So
that's my case. That's my case, and that's why I started this show.
Yeah. So I would say first decide if you want to raise money, and if not, how much time and resources you want to invest. If you raise money, it's the same analogy applies, right? With the difference that like you're going to have a structure and like a speed at which you're going to operate is going to be much higher, right? Like when you don't raise money, you also have your own rhythm, like your own metrics, like you're effectively, with the exception of your customers that are kind of your new bosses, you really don't. That's you only report to them. When you have investors, and depending on the type of investors you have, they're kind of become your bosses, not completely, but they bring discipline to the structure, right? Which I'm happy that we brought them, right? For me, it was a conscious choice to go for raise venture capital money. We're fortunate to have amazing investors, but
did you select them, or did you just like go with the first ones and give you money, or did you look at particular ones?
We got lucky that we were able to choose.
Yeah.
That being said, even if you don't get to choose, it's pretty fortunate to be able to raise venture capital, right? Like the other folks we were speaking to were also phenomenal investors. You cannot accommodate everyone, right? But as a founder, if you still get one term sheet, you should be very happy, right? Like you're part of a selective few of folks that got that term sheet. But raising venture is not like revenue, right? It just you bought yourself the chance to like really try to go big, right? Or at a faster pace, because you can go big also without venture money. It's just the speed at which you're going to be able to execute, and that it is a nice day, but it's on to the next one and keep it up, right? Like it feels very good for like 48 hours, and then you just need to go execute, right? Like it's it's same thing for customers, right? Every time we sign a new customer, we're super grateful. We put 100% all our hearts into like making them successful. But if you raise venture, you just or if you have the type of personalities that my component and I have, we look into the next client, right? Because then again, it's dynasty building. It's you really believe that your product is the best solution out there, and if you have that mission of making credit accessible to more people, then you need to ensure that like more people are using your platform.
Yeah. Look, in my case, we bootstrapped, and we took quite a long time. But in the last few years, there are other companies that had a lot of investment doing the same thing that just completely overtook us. And we in hindsight, having investment money, particularly to inject into sales and marketing, would have been key for us. So even though I think if you can bootstrap, I think it's usually the best thing, just depending. But you got to look at that timing as well. So do you need to really move your business on really quickly and get into the market before a lot of other competitors are going to come and just overtake? I guess so. There's a lot of questions around that. So in your case, that you could choose your investors. So was that your background in Wall Street, or what do you think it was that got you over that line, and you actually had choices on who you could go with?
I think it's a really well run process, first and foremost. Like,
Mhm.
aside like the credentials that definitely help, I think that like you still need the process matters, right? So let's say you are a healthcare startup and you're trying to cure celiac disease, right? Or with a new thing that you change via technology software. So you first and foremost look at all the universe of investors that are lead investors, because that matters too. Because when you're like early days, you don't know any of this, right? But like a lead investor is the one that actually do diligence, and they say like you're worth X, and I'm going to lead this round. Follow investors, you shouldn't stick with them in the beginning. You can speak with them later, and they add value, but they do not they do not write that first check. So
Mhm.
make sure that you know who are the leads. Second is find uh, similar, to use the power of analogy, find investors that have been invested in similar companies to you that are not competitive. Let's say you're Uber, uh, and you go and look for the area investors for Airbnb, right? Because it's kind of like similar, right? But it's not the same thing. Or you're an airline, you're going to look into bus companies. It's transportation as a whole. So you look at which investors have recently invested in there, and not only the funds, you look at the particular partner within that fund that has led that investment. And it's easier to say, hey, Paul, I saw you invested in X. We are the X of Y. Would love to meet you, right? And you see who are you connected. If you're not connected directly to that person, it's like who in your network is connected to them, and you essentially build a CRM of like a contact list of like, I don't know, 100 to 200 funds that, and you set that list of like the first ones you want to touch base with. What would be your top clients, your top targets, and then like run that process, right? Otherwise, what you're gonna if you don't do that, what you're going to be is like every day wake up and check on LinkedIn who's an investor, right? And like that, if you spend like that week or two of like actually putting that list together, then you can actually create a dynamic. And you can say like, okay, next month I'm going to launch the process. I'm going to have a deck. That deck, you can follow the Sequoia type of guidelines. So that Y Combinator has pretty damn good recommendations on how to run a fundraising process. Don't reinvent the wheel. Literally use those decks and like just apply it to your startup. Have a couple of friends or folks in the space kind of look them up just to see if it rings, and go fundraise, right? Like create the scarcity by virtue of like talking with a lot of people in a compressed time frame, and communicate what your goals are, and you will quickly see that if it hunts or not, and then you can apply the learnings and like reiterate on the deck. But I think it process writing running a pretty tight process would really help us.
Did you, when you were looking for investors, did you already have clients and revenue?
No, originally no. I
Because it's
I
it's known, like in the US, the investors are much more likely to invest in a startup that's in that early sort of stage and
Yeah,
idea stage, whereas in Australia it's much more difficult. A lot of them really want to see that revenue, and like in my case, it was like, we thought, well, if we need investment money, and to get that we need clients, then
yeah,
why, if we've got clients and got revenue, why do I need investment? That was
yeah.
my thought at the time. But Yeah, so yeah, I heard in America there are investors are a lot more likely to give it at that early stage.
Yeah,
Maybe
I
they're
mean,
bigger risk takers. I don't know.
yeah, there's definitely more appetite. The capital markets are way more like fleshed out here, right? So like in the
Yeah.
market in itself is much bigger than
Mm.
Australia. So I think that's what happens. The That doesn't mean that you just do a PowerPoint and you go raise money, right? Like there's a lot of preparation.
Yeah.
In a way, what you present is a market study, right? In which you say this is exciting. This area of the market is pretty interesting. These are some of the proof points that I collected either through outside research or through like creating revenue or partnerships that you set or customers that you have spoken to. And like you present that data and you let the investment community kind of decide if you're worthy of an investment. So that's kind of how it works, right? And obviously like each country, as you mentioned, is different, and I can only speak to the US, but
Yeah.
uh, the principles are kind of the same, right? Like if you're like pre-revenue or not, that's kind of more of a nuance. The process of you still how to identify the best investors, that still holds true in any geography, right?
Mm.
Like just how you should go about it.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
So once you have that list and then you go about contacting them, so do you do this through LinkedIn? I mean, how do you get in touch with these people?
I mean, there's a couple. For example, Crunchbase will have lists of companies, right? So you can
Mhm.
actually see, or TechCrunch, or Y Combinator. You could actually become a student of which companies are raising Series A's. That's a that's a well-known strategy. You
Mhm.
go and see where companies raise Series A's, and you kind of do exactly what Lyft did with Uber. It's like, okay, these guys are a year ahead of me. I'm gonna go copy that. And I was listening to a couple of some podcasts a few days ago, and saying like the first thing you should do is you should copy something and then do it better, right? Very few ideas are original ideas. Facebook is not an original idea. We know that, right?
Yeah.
Even there was MySpace. There was a plethora of other.
Yeah.
It just like copy something that is pretty hot and just do it way better, right?
Mm. Mhm.
Whereas original ideas, uh, those are like harder, right? Because usually they are in a market that's not tested. There's no proof point. So, if anything, like I believe a lot in the idea of like just making something significantly better.
I like that. I like that. I mean, obviously there's both, making something better or totally new idea. And definitely like when I started my startup creating 360 VR
Mhm.
in training scenarios, 2017, there was in Australia anyway, we were the first. And that wasn't necessarily an advantage because people were like, what is this? What's this VR
Yeah,
stuff? Oh, it's 3D. Like no one understood it. Technology wasn't there,
right.
So yeah, I think that's a really good thing to make something a lot better than it is. I think they say, isn't there a saying that you got to make something 10 times better than what's currently there to bring people over, especially with technology, to bring them over
Yeah.
from one thing to another. So yeah, that's really good advice. All right. Well, if there was like just one piece of advice you could give an early stage startup founder, what would that be?
Be honest with yourself, right? I mean,
Mhm.
my grandfather always told my dad, like, you can lie to others, but not to yourself. I think that very early on, the sooner you realize how unglamorous starting a company is, the better you're going to be as a. So, like, don't do it because it's sexy. Do it because you love it. Do it because you actually believe in the idea. Do it because you owe it to your customers, and don't
Yeah.
don't don't do it because of for the wrong reasons, right?
Yeah.
And I find starting a business the most gratifying experience of my life. Uh, but it is hard. It is not harder than other things, right? I think being a soldier, being a mother, being other things is significantly harder. But as far as professional journeys go, it's been like my favorite journey, and I'm very grateful that we get the opportunity to do so. Um, just do it for the right reasons. Don't lie to yourself. That's the fundamental. Not everyone needs to be a founder to be happy. Like there's a beautiful set of other careers you can do.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. You really have to have that purpose and really want to do something for the right reasons. And I saw a couple of posts that you have of Steve Jobs on your LinkedIn, and he's pretty much saying the same. You know, it's a really hard journey, and you really got to believe in what you're doing. Otherwise, there's no use, really.
Oh yeah, exactly. Like it's if you don't believe in it, then like it's a colossal waste of time. Because you need to convince yourself before you convince others. So the first months of any ideation phase, it's really like if you're going to do this, the number one believer should be you. And you shouldn't believe in it because others believe in it. You should believe it because you believe in it. And little by little, the other believers will come. But if no one comes to believe, then that's probably a good signal for you to like try a different idea.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, look, on that note, it was great talking to you, Andres, all the way over in New York. And I think there's some really, really good advice for startup founders and entrepreneurs. And I wish you very much all the best with your startup. And it seems like it is doing really well, which is fantastic. And maybe we can have another chat in the future.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.